Hello, everyone, and welcome to the end of the spring 2024 Capstones. I keep saying that I can't believe Hannah made me go last because it's very daunting to close out such a spectacular cohort, but I will do my best. My name is Naya Chang. I am a public artist, and as of Sunday, no longer strictly speaking, a history student, but still a history enthusiast, or perhaps an aspiring historian. Before I begin, I'd like to acknowledge some people. Janet Zweig has been my most important public art mentor. Stephen Lubar has been a mentor in history, museums, and art. Professor Seth Rockman and Emily Owens taught me how to do history. And my furniture design faculty, especially Joe Warren, taught me how to make furniture and then let me make whatever I wanted to. The RISD Museum, RISD Library, Brown Libraries, Brown Arts Institute, Brown Public Art Working Group, and facilities crews at both schools have all supported my work in various ways. I owe a lot to Evan Sherman, who was by my side in both history writing and in art production. And I'd like to thank the dual degree cohort of 2024 for the past half decade that got better with each year. My extended family on the East Coast has given me a much appreciated second home. And finally, I'd like to thank my siblings and my parents for supporting all my endeavors and dealing with me when those endeavors made me very stressed. I'm going to spend most of my time telling you about what I've been up to for the past year, but like many of my fellow presenters, I'd like to start by going back. In high school, I was very fascinated by monuments, and so it seemed was everyone else. Most conversations about monuments revolved around statues to the Confederacy and the calls to remove them that arose after the Charleston church shooting of 2015 and the Unite the Right rally of 2017. I believed and still believe that all Confederate monuments should be torn down, and I was much more intellectually interested in monuments with a little bit of nuance. Statues of Columbus, for example, which seemed to matter a great deal to older generations of Italian Americans, or Abraham Lincoln patronizingly standing over a freedman, a statue paid for by emancipated slaves. Debates over monuments sparked my interest in public space and the stories about the past that we tell in public space through visual markers. If some argued tearing down Confederate statues was erasing an objective account of the past, historians argued that to remove monuments was, quote, not to erase history, but rather to alter or call attention to a previous interpretation of history. Every account of history is an interpretation, which is not to say that some aren't better and more truthful than others. This is something I was thinking about when I wrote my high school senior thesis about the value of putting monuments that celebrated underrepresented figures in dialogue with antiquated white men. And yet, no bronze figure, whether a white man or a woman of color, has ever really resonated with me. The public art I've enjoyed throughout my life is not people on pedestals. It's stuff that is delightful in unexpected places or critical in a clever way. Similarly, I'm drawn to history not for grandiose stories about individuals who purportedly changed the course of time, but for complicated accounts of coalitions, contradictions, and contingencies. With this all in mind, we land here in spring 2023. This is Peter Greenhouse, one of two buildings that house the Brown History Department. By the end of my fourth year in college, we skipped a lot of years, I was in a place where my thinking about visual markers and public space had culminated in my first public art installation, and my historical training had led me to produce a prospectus for an honors thesis. I am going to talk about the latter thing first. I frequently tell people that history is the best department at Brown, and for me, this is largely because of the professors. Historians at Brown engage in something one of my professors called slow history, which means they might take 15 years to write a book. But this slow history benefits us students because it allows professors to devote much of their yearly energy to meeting with us in office hours and advising our projects. It also means their research is so rigorous, thorough, and well synthesized that every lecture in a history course is like story time. I'd like to attempt a mini version of story time now, and after my work over the last year researching and writing a 118-page thesis, there is one I am qualified to tell you. Don't laugh, it's about the early American rubber industry. So if you've heard a story about rubber, it is probably one that starts in the late 19th century with a man called Goodyear. It probably involves a bicycle craze, rubber trees growing on violent plantations, automobile tires, and World War II. In this narrative, rubber is a behemoth, but my story begins before that. In the 1820s, the port city of Salem was coming off a post-revolution golden era of trade with India and China. Though that era was ending, the population knew only maritime commerce, and merchants started looking for new markets to enter to keep their livelihoods. A few started sailing to northern Brazil, where they found hides, cocoa, tapioca, and rubber. Rubber is a natural plant product, and for thousands of years, indigenous Brazilians tapped rubber trees and manufactured shoes, bottles, and toys by dipping molds into fresh liquid latex, like a candle. Salem captains saw these products and they were intrigued. Rubber is waterproof, airproof, flexible, and durable, and a material like that had not been seen in the United States before. So Salem captains brought rubber shoes back to New England, and sales of the early pairs showed there was demand. Merchants could purchase rubber shoes for a few cents a pair in Brazil, but individual consumers paid a few dollars. So as you can imagine, it was not long before enterprising New Englanders tried to find their own way into the emerging rubber industry. The first wave of domestic rubber manufacturing in the United States began in the mid-1830s and lasted only a few years. The first and largest was the Roxbury India Rubber Company, which was founded in 1832 and eventually employed 150 men, women, and children. The Roxbury Company attracted investors who were extremely excited about the prospect of a company that would make not only waterproof shoes, but jackets, pants, wagon covers, umbrellas. But unlike rubber manufacturing in Brazil, U.S. rubber manufacturers had to work with hardened rubber because liquid latex spoils. Though entrepreneurs did many experiments with solvents to dissolve rubber and spread it on fabric, they could not make reliable products. Rubber goods melted, they stuck together, they stunk. Wholesalers frequently and increasingly wrote letters like the following. The hats have just come to hand, and we regret to inform that they are so badly finished that it would be impossible for us to dispose of them. They are put together so very unworkmanlike that the hats are not worth as much as the material was. Imported rubber shoes from Brazil also couldn't stay in the market. Though they were more sturdy than domestically manufactured products, they were deemed unfashionable for proper Victorian women. Being so thick, they could also make the feet feel like red-hot yams. So the first wave of the American rubber industry and trade ended in failure. And I've just spent the better part of my year knee-deep in thousands of pages of correspondence and business records trudging through this awful handwriting, and the question is, why does this matter? If we only study the American rubber industry when it is already something huge, we see a narrative of industrial capitalism that looks much more linear and teleological than it actually was. Of course, Goodyear figured out how to make rubber a more stable product. Of course, we grew rubber trees on plantations. Of course, we won World War II. My research shows the path to industrialization was much more bumpy than that it wasn't always controlled by the top down, like in the case of textile mills, that it did not rely on individual geniuses so much as on, for example, scrappy overseas traders meeting indigenous South Americans. There is no way to frame the story of the early American rubber industry as something that is not fairly niche. But this is what historians do. We learn existing stories, conduct research, and frame our intervention, hoping to reveal something about our societies that had not been known before. The historian's framework of research and intervention is the same framework I apply to my public art. We come back to Peter Greenhouse, and it is time to talk about these bendy columns. So in 2007, this 300-ton house was picked up in one piece and moved 400 feet down the street to make room for new developments. There is a time-lapse video of this astonishing feat, and that inspired this installation, which wonders if parts of the house want to go back. This is not the most research-heavy installation you will see today, but its location outside the Brown History Department was a gift. The historians inside the house would tell me, this is about institutional memory and Brown's long relationship with the city's historical preservation policies. In contrast, but not contradiction, non-academics spoke to me about the column's whimsical natures. We debated if they were somersaulting like a slinky or hopping like a Pixar lamp. This installation in many ways set the tone and trajectory for the rest of my public work. Though lots of public art is very stoic, I thought about my audience being the people of College Hill, who are very busy and very concerned with the world's big issues, And I thought maybe what we need is an intervention that is actually fun, that does have deeper layers of meaning, but can also give a bit of delight with just a glance. I created another piece with delight in mind, these chairs made to look like a deconstructed, de-elevated version of the Henry Moore sculpture, which in my estimation takes itself very seriously. And as you may have caught, I am technically a furniture design major, so I was pleased that Brown students found these chairs very comfortable. This here is the first public art piece for which I entered the archives. Those who have been inside RISD's magnificent Fleet Library may know it used to be a banking hall of the Rhode Island Hospital Trust Company. In an attempt to recontextualize RISD's spatial history within the larger history of Providence, and to inspire a sense of wonder and exploration in library patrons, I recreated the reception desk that used to sit under the bank's globular clock, and I set up a scavenger hunt that would lead participants around the first floor. Through reading volumes of the bank's monthly magazine, I adopted the persona of the bank's directors and used this voice to flesh out my project. As participants collected banknotes at different locations, they read about the building's Renaissance-style architecture, the bank's commitment to friendly service, and the existence of an underground steel vault that still exists today. At the end of this installation, I did a raffle of the completed scavenger hunt checks, and the winner received an authentic safe deposit box from the vault, a tangible reminder of the building's previous utility. I returned to the RISD archives for this work, my largest installation and an academic example, you could say, of my research and intervention practice. This is the old entrance to the RISD Museum, and as I learned from my research, its design is very intentional. In the 1920s, museum trustees commissioned an expansion that would match the aesthetic of the rest of Benefit Street, which was lined with houses built in the neo-colonial style. This look, they thought, would be the most welcoming and agreeable to their patrons. The patrons at the time, of course, being Providence's white elite. Inspired by the fact that bricks have been used for thousands of years by civilizations around the globe, I decided to break up the facade of this building with two different windows. On the left is brickwork inspired by West and Central Asian Islamic architecture, and on the right is brickwork inspired by South Asian architecture, particularly Buddhist temples in Bagan, Myanmar. I was lucky enough in this project to have some lines of support that I had not previously had. For one thing, the bricks in the project were generously donated to me by Spalding Brick Company in Cranston after I pitched them my proposal. And for another, I had the assistance of the museum's expert installation team as we bolted over 1,000 pounds of materials to the building's walls. Within the framework of research and site specificity, you can tell I wanted to try out a lot of different genres of public art in my time at Brown and RISD. For my next project, I wanted to do something that I didn't ask permission for. You can tell I do not have the soul of a street artist because I also picked something that I would be very unlikely to get in trouble for. I did a civic favor. New England weather makes for horrible streets, and I found 3 deep sidewalk cracks on College Hill and pondered for a long time what to fill them with. Thinking about archaeology and the fact that if you dug in the ground in Providence, you would actually find a lot of stuff, led me to wonder if I could fill the sidewalk with something that referenced the fact that College Hill is on Narragansett ancestral lands. In conversation with 2 Narragansett tribal members, one a historian and one a shell bead or wampum artist, I developed and implemented this street art project, which involved me picking up quahog shells from a clammer's backyard, cutting them up, and setting them into the sidewalk. Quahogs are quintessentially Rhode Island, and the Narragansett peoples used to, and still do, value them for their abundance and beauty. And finally, we are back to monuments. This is Caesar Augustus, the first emperor of Rome. In 1906, he had an arm. In 2024, he does not. What transpired was the Great Hurricane of 1938 and a prosthetic arm, then later, a group of vandals robbing him once more. The pose he originally struck was the adlocution pose, his right arm outstretched, addressing the troops, and showing brown men dignity and power. In 2019 and 2020, a group of students led a push to remove Roman statues from campus, arguing they glorified colonialism and idealized whiteness. Other community members defended the statues, arguing they are important, apolitical works of art. My feelings about Augustus fall into neither camp. Especially because he is missing his gesturing arm, Augustus is hardly a commanding force over the Brown campus. My research in the Hay Library and the Brown Daily Herald archives revealed students have been putting the much maligned figure in beer case helmets and cardboard protest signs since at least 1960. I decided to give Augustus some prosthetic arms, and I decided to make them a little stupid, both to reference the history of antics played on him by Brown students over the years, and to ask what power monuments really hold over us, especially when they are subverted. Here is the adlocutio pose cast in foam, flopping down, looking broken. And here is Caesar working a car wash, his inflatable arm flapping in the wind. And now, with subverted Augustus before you, I'm going to try to come up with the beginnings of a compelling argument for the value of a liberal arts and arts education. People much smarter than me have been trying to do this for a long time. They have said vague things about how the humanities teach you to be a thinker or a citizen. Some have stooped to the stance that consulting and tech actually want English majors after all. Still, the number of liberal arts degrees granted each year keeps dropping. We are the 12th graduating class of the Brown RISD dual degree, which means there are a little under 180 alumni of the program. I am only the second history major among them. Many of us have arts degrees and intend to pursue fine arts, but I think it is also fair to say that many choose the dual degree because it means that the art degree is only half of what you can walk away with. Because I have studied history and art, I am a better thinker and a better citizen. I am able to learn something about capitalism from a pair of rubber shoes, and I'm able to remix public space in ways that make people laugh. But that individualized argument alone doesn't seem to be catching. Many people just don't see the arts as lucrative enough, or they subscribe to Silicon Valley, my home's model of value and productivity. And others think policy studies are just more urgent in today's deteriorating world. I'm wondering if we need to take a broader view to see the value of a liberal arts and arts education. If we need to understand that the reason we remember so-called great civilizations, whether it's ancient China, the Islamic Golden Age, Caesar and his Romans, is because of the art they produced and the learning they embraced. I am not trying to romanticize the past. I would not choose to live in any other time but today. But the society I want to live in is one that values its artists and its scholars for the fact that those people try to make material what makes us human. I think that is an impressive, a fulfilled society. And getting there, I do not think is a flippant endeavor. I think that is how we can all live better lives. Thank you.